guys, former film student back today with episode 15 of 31 Nights, 31 Frights. Today we're going to the 70s with Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I do apologize, guys, I wish I did have just a Shining Blu-ray or DVD, but unfortunately this was all I was able to find at my Target. It's a two-film collection of Doctor Sleep and The Shining. And I don't know why Doctor Sleep is on the top and The Shining is on the bottom. You would think that it would be the other way around, but yeah, I don't know. I love The Shining, and I'd never seen Doctor Sleep, so this is what I got. Which is fine, I guess. I don't know. I'd never seen it. It's a fine movie. It's sort of an unnecessary sequel. I don't know why they thought it would be a good idea to make a sequel to probably one of the most famous and most well liked horror films of all time. But they did, so this is what we're stuck with. So yes, The Shining. The Shining is one of my personal favorite films of all time. I believe right now I currently have it in my top 20 favorite movies of all time. It is one that I just, from the first time I watched it, absolutely loved, even before I got into filmmaking and understanding the art of filmmaking and understanding like all the technical aspects like cinematography and editing and special effects and pacing and all of that stuff. It's just one that I gravitated towards, mainly for Jack Nicholson's performance. This was the movie that got me to fall in love with Jack Nicholson as an actor. He is still to this day my favorite actor of all time. It's a shame that he's not working in films anymore. I really would like to have seen what he would have done later in his career, but I think he has. I'm not sure if he has Alzheimer's or dementia. I do apologize for not knowing, but he has some sort of illness that I think prevents him from acting in films, and it's a real shame because man, he is so talented, and this movie especially is probably my favorite performance by him. Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance in The Shining is just one of the most iconic performances in cinema history. The whole "Here's Johnny" scene when he, takes the axe and he bashes it through the door and he's trying to kill Shelley Duvall. It is just such a great culturally iconic scene. But the entire film, and I know that one of the things about this film that everyone talks about is how Stephen King, the writer of the Shining book, hates this movie. He hates the direction that Stanley Kubrick took. He hated Jack Nicholson as the character, and he just felt like it was very disrespectful and not, very in line with what he would have wanted the film adaptation to be. Which I don't know. Stephen King sort of just hates everything that his stuff is based off of, and clearly he should just stick to writing books because he does actually have a two-part TV series called The Shining. That was released straight to TV. And it's horrible. It's poorly directed. It's poorly acted. The cinematography is bland. It's boring. It's bad all around. But The Shining is again, it's probably the most well liked horror thriller of all time, right up there with Silence of the Lambs. If I had to pick two films, I would say Silence of the Lambs and The Shining. Those are like the two that get the most universal praise between critics, between audiences. And The Shining for good reason. This movie again does everything right. The cinematography, for starters, is absolutely brilliant. The long tracking shot of Danny Torrance on his little tricycle riding through the Overlook Hotel, and the sound design that complements that scene so incredibly well, with hearing the wheels hit the wood, and it creates this sort of ominous noise, and there's no music in that scene, which I think just makes it so much more intense, so much more scary. You have the wood sound, and then he hits the carpet and it goes silent for a little bit, and then it hits the wood again, and just between the long tracking shot following the character, this sort of looming sense of dread as we follow him, complemented by that sound design. It's such brilliant filmmaking, and Stanley Kubrick, again, throughout the entire film, does such an excellent job. There's so many long tracking shots, there's so many just wide shots that take their time. It's not hyper edited, it doesn't feel choppy at any times. It's just a very patient, very well crafted film from pretty much every conceivable standpoint. To add on to that, the opening scene of this movie is absolutely bone chilling. The long tracking shot of the camera zooming in on Jack Torrance's car as it goes around the building, and the haunting score that this movie is so famous for. It just, again, there's no one thing that makes every scene work. It's just a blend of amazing technical feats on all sides. It's the directing, it's the performances, it's the cinematography, it's the very patient editing. It's everything combined to make this movie what it is, which is, again, probably the best horror film ever made. It's not my favorite, and I'm trying to put personal bias aside when I say this, but I do think this is probably the best made horror film, because there's a lot of times where you have really well made horror films that are really good. They're great from a technical level, but they don't really scare you. And then vice versa, you have ones that scare you. A movie like Sinister, which to me is a very frightening film, but just is not that well made. The performances, the cinematography, none of that is exceptional in a movie like that. And then you have movies like The Shining, where everything just works on every fundamental level. It's scary, it's incredibly well made, the performances are great, the cinematography is not only well composed and well lit, but the cinematography is very purposeful in the camera work. The editing is patient and it takes its time. The characters are great. It's amazing in this film to watch Jack Nicholson as the character of Jack Torrance just slowly go crazier and crazier, and you really feel like there's this ominous presence in this hotel that's driving him mad, even though for a lot of the film you don't see anything. You have the very famous scene of the Grady twin girls, the whole come play with us thing. You have the very iconic scene of the elevator doors opening with the sort of pool of blood coming from them. And again, just the fact that I'm able to name all of these different scenes that I think a lot of people who, again, haven't even seen this movie probably will recognize as seeing either parodied in other things or some other film or TV show paying homage to them, or just seeing a clip of it on YouTube. There's so many scenes in this film that are very iconic, very, relevant, and just overall, it's just a movie that I think, again, works on so many different levels. I truthfully don't think there is a flaw in this movie. There are very few movies in this world that I consider to be perfect films. Movies that maybe there's minor, very minor things that are wrong. Maybe it's a lighting choice in a scene or a delivery of a piece of dialogue or something like that, but there's nothing that even comes to mind when I think of this film of things that I would change. I think from start to finish, this is a pretty much flawless movie. I think all of the technical aspects are incredibly well done. It's Stanley Kubrick. I mean, it's Stanley Kubrick. The guy doesn't make bad movies. He just simply doesn't. He's one of the best directors of all time for a reason. The guy has pretty much never made a bad film. I've never seen a movie from him that I thought was bad or that I didn't like. He's an incredible director, and The Shining is no exception. It's my favorite film of his by far. I don't think any of his other films come close as far as my personal enjoyment. In terms of quality, yes, obviously 2001: A Space Odyssey, Eyes Wide Shut. He has a lot of great films that are just probably on this level in terms of quality. A Clockwork Orange. But in terms of my personal enjoyment and ones that just affect me the most, nothing even comes close to The Shining. This is a movie that I think everybody should watch. If you're a fan of horror films, if you haven't seen this movie, what are you doing? And if you're not a fan of horror films, it's not your very conventional horror film where a family moves into a house and, oh, the house is haunted. There's a lot of psychological horror going on in this film that I think a lot of people will enjoy. If you're just a fan of great filmmaking, The Shining is a great film to study. This film does have a little bit of a shady backstory. Yes, there was a little bit of issues on set. Apparently, Stanley Kubrick was very abusive to Shelley Duvall, and he had the cast be very abusive towards her. Not physically, like he didn't physically hurt her, but apparently it was a lot of psychological and a lot of mental. Um, he like told everyone to ignore her and not talk to her. And I used to actually really dislike Shelley Duvall's performance in this movie. I thought it was very over the top and a little corny at times. But I've grown to really appreciate her performance, and not just because I know that she was sort of tortured on that set, but just because over time I just start to see the little nuances in her character and to see what makes her performance so great. But everyone across the board is great. Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, the child actor who plays Danny Torrance, is one of the rare child performances that is actually not just not bad, which a lot of kid performances are, but it's actually a genuinely good performance. When he's playing the character of Danny Torrance and he's just being a kid, he feels like a kid. When he's being sort of possessed by what he calls his imaginary friend Tony, I feel like he's a different character. And he does such a great job in the movie as well. all around just a fantastic movie. Again, if you haven't seen this movie, go and do it. I highly recommend. I can't recommend The Shining enough. It is a just phenomenal movie. I find myself to be someone who has decent taste in movies, and this again is one of my favorite films of all time. Top 20 for me, probably top 10 if I really had to narrow it down. Just an excellent film from start to finish. I think the film is paced perfectly. Nothing feels wasted. Nothing feels like it drags on for too long. Everything it does feels very purposeful. And there's a great point in the film where the film just really just goes off the rails and it just becomes super thrilling. And the build up is so worth it because the payoff is great and just everything works in this movie. There's not really much I want to say more about this film. I feel like I've said everything I can say. Yeah, that is it for today. Have you guys seen The Shining? If you have, let me know your thoughts on it in the comments down below. Again, I cannot recommend this movie enough. Normally, I would recommend this movie and then apologize it if you guys didn't like it, but I can't apologize for this movie. I do think that everybody can find something to enjoy in this movie. So yeah, I'm not going to apologize if you don't like it, because if you don't like it, then there's something wrong with you. Just kidding. Yeah, so that is it for today. As always, if you guys like this video, make sure to click the like button, subscribe to me if you want to hear more from me. Make sure to click the little bell notification so you do get notified when I post new videos. And as always, I will see you guys on the next episode.